I got myself a glass of water, so now Will will be able to understand me.
He wasn't the only one. No one was Wisconsin
Trying to overcome that. Okay, guys. I want to take you guys on the journey that I've been on the last week. And I'll be honest, it's been kind of a rough week for me. And so as I was thinking about what am I going to talk about tonight, I thought of what we do in here, and we leave all the junk in the parking lot. So that's what I'm going to do. Because this week I've really felt distant from God, and even more than distant, I felt rebellious towards God. There's been this thing inside me where if I would really reflect on my actions and my thoughts, I'd have to say that I've been showing up, and I've been saying, okay, God, I'll show up, but I really don't want to invite you to show up in certain places in my life. You know, you're okay here, you're okay at Engage, you're okay at Encounters. You know, when Jill and I are having a rough night, you're okay to show up there and bail us out. But there's certain places throughout the last week where I didn't want God to show up. You know, I was traveling a lot, and I know that one of the things that if I listen to the radio and I put on all the junk that's on the regular radio stations, it takes my mind to a bad place, and I went there. You know, and then I was busy. I was traveling a lot. I was getting not a lot of sleep, and so I was giving God scrap time. You know, I might read my Bible for a couple minutes in the morning. I might throw some prayers up there, but it wasn't quality time. And then there was the time that I had with Jill, or when I got some downtime to myself, and I really didn't want to talk about God. I really didn't want to invite Him into that time. I wanted to watch football, or I wanted to just do some mindless yard work. And not that those things are bad things, but I didn't want it. I wanted God to stay out, because the truth was that I felt like God was kind of pushing Himself into a lot of places in my life, and I didn't want Him in a lot of those places. I felt like He was getting to be a bit much. And then as I was feeling that, I did what we always say don't do around here. You know, I didn't reach out. I didn't call somebody up, and really I avoided talking about it, because the reality is I was showing up, but I was just kind of saying stuff, and I was avoiding it. And it got to the point where this last Saturday I got back from hiking, and I was in the shower, and my emotions just kind of, you just kind of let my emotions run out, and I realized that I was in this place where I was ready to call up Will and say, hey, I'm not going to talk on Monday night. I'm probably not going to show up at Engage, and really emotionally, I'm ready to quit. And that really scared me, because the truth of it is, what I know is that I love you guys. You know, I love being able to sit down and just pour out my heart to you guys, and you know, and engage with you guys. And yet inside me there was this rebelliousness of saying, God, you know, I'm ready for you to take a hike. What's the point? Why am I here? Why am I doing all this? And once I got to that point, and I wanted to know where it was, God really hit me right between the eyes on Sunday morning. When Woody started to talk about offerings, and what do we bring to God? Are we bringing our best to God? And especially when it comes to serving. You know, am I showing up because there's an expectation, because I want to impress people, or because I want to get approval from people? You know, why am I showing up? And what am I bringing to God? And I realized that what I've been bringing to God, it was tainted. It wasn't my best offering. And that was leading me to be rebellious. And that was leading me into, really, to be frank, it was to envying some of the guys who really were showing up and giving God their best. And that put distance between me and my brothers, between me and you guys, and it put distance between me and God. So I want to kind of take you down the journey of where that started and what God has done in me the last 2 days of dealing with that. Really, to be honest, it started a couple weeks ago when Woody invited all the people up in front of the church to pray over them at the end of the All In series. It brought up some emotional baggage for me. When I was going to an old church, there was a pastor who used to do that, and he would do it about every 5 weeks, and all the people would line up, and he would pray over them, and it became this cult of personality. And this pastor did some things to Jill and I that really hurt us. And so even though I knew that what he was doing wasn't that, it didn't look like that, his motivations weren't that, you know, that emotional baggage just got stirred up inside me. and I transferred it to Woody, even though I knew it wasn't right, but I still let a little bit of that transfer to Woody, and there's some resentment there. And there's some hurt there. And then I got to see Will and Stephen struggling the last couple weeks, and I felt that some commitments that they had made that they didn't follow through on 100% on. And as I saw that, I held on to that, and both the things with Will and Woody and Stephen, I let it be a separation between us. I looked at that, and I don't expect them to be perfect. And honestly, the reason that I respect them is because when they're struggling, they're honest about it, and they don't hold in. They get up here and they talk about it. But because I let it fester. It created this separation between me and them, and it created this separation between me and God. And then we started this In and Through series when we talked about serving. And my old identity was that when it came to serving, I wanted to be the most influential, I wanted to show up at the most places, I wanted to be the most devoted, and I wanted to be the most committed, and I wanted everybody else to see that. And I would do whatever it took to feed that identity. I put it before my wife, I put it before the rest of my family, I put it before my friends, and really I put it before having a relationship with Jesus. And when I became a Christ follower, that changed. My identity as a servant became my identity, and then all the things I did just flowed out of that. But the last couple of weeks, I started to forget that, and I started to look at a guy like Joe, and he shows up to all these places, and he's serving, and he is influencing people to move closer to God, and God is really using him. And to be honest, I had a lot of envy for him. And my response to that was that I started to look for new and better places to serve, places where maybe I could get noticed more, where I could get approval from people, and I started to revert back to my old identity. Those situations, they all had a common theme, though. I took my eyes off of Jesus, and I started to look at the people around me. And when I did that, my old identity started surfacing, and I started to take my self-worth from what I was doing. I started to look to serving to identify me. I started to identify myself by what I was doing instead of who God made me to be. And eventually that led to rebellion, because I wanted a little space. I felt like every situation I was in, every place I was in, there's all this pressure to do stuff. And there's all this pressure to bring God everywhere. And I was just like, okay, God, I want some time where I can just have to myself and not feel guilty because I'm not serving you here. So I want to talk about a place in the Bible where there was somebody else who kind of went on that same journey, and look at some of the principles there. There are these two brothers, and one of them was a farmer, and farmers grow crops. And one of them was a rancher, and ranchers raise animals. And they both brought these offerings to God. And the rancher, he brought some of the best cuts of meat from the best animals he had, and he offered it to God.